Hi, I'm Chad Burnson with Palo Alto Networks, and I'm joined by John Swartz from USA Today. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Welcome to Ignite.
Thanks for having me.
So John, cybersecurity, a big focus at USA Today now, a growing focus. Wasn't always the case.
It wasn't always the case. Up until a few years ago, it was kind of off and on. We didn't quite understand what we wanted to do with it. We were intimidated by it. But we've decided in the last year, I would argue that 2 of the 5 most important stories that we did last year were the NSA and the Target stories. I think it kind of woke people up, especially on the East Coast, who kind of dismiss cybersecurity as a scare tactic industry. Now they've taken it very seriously. And not only are they devoting resources from people across the paper to those 2 stories, we've actually have a year-long project about the dark web that we're going to throw our best reporters at. We've run 2 of the stories. I'm working on the 3rd one. We're going to do this all year. It's pretty much unprecedented. We have, I would say, 6 or 7 of our best reporters throughout the publication working on this theme all year.
So really, I mean, we've had breaches before. We've had front page breaches before and lots of security issues before. But what made NSA in particular, and also Target?
Well, the fact that they happen around the same time, and the fact that Google gets as much attention as it does from us, and the fact that you have Google, Facebook, Apple, either participating in this or being at least used in some manner, brought a lot of attention to the NSA story. The Target story was different. I mean, there have been large breaches before, like TJX, but this one actually had more of a life. Every time it seemed as if Target had a handle on things, it would blow up and would mushroom. And the idea that it reached as many people as it has, and the fact that it has such a kind of an undercurrent of paranoia twinned with the NSA story, has actually created this kind of monster, and I think that's good. One of the problems we had before was we'd write about a story, there'd be a level of interest back east, and then they would drop it for something else that came along. There'd be the story cycle. Mm-hmm. Here now is actually, it's like a current, it's an undercurrent of something that affects all of us, millions of Americans especially. We use more data than ever. We're letting everyone know what we're doing every moment of the day, whether we know it or not. And I think that actually kind of builds into this big brother theory that appeals to the editors back east. Plus, there's the level of interest in this story, in both stories, is extremely high.
What are your business readers in particular wanting out of this coverage, and the balance between kind of the action on the threats versus the technology itself?
So one of the things I tried to do, there's kind of a cause and effect. On one hand, they want to know how deep the problem goes and how it affects people's personal information, for instance. Like, for instance, my wife has a credit card that was kind of under surveillance because there was a thought that it was being breached in some manner. So it kind of hits all of us at home. And I think one of the things that we're going to see going forward is this whole kind of dance that Google and Facebook in particular are going to have to cope with, particularly Google. I mean, Google's based so much on the data that it accumulates and puts to good use for all of us. And I think on one hand, as they get bigger and stronger, and they will, they're just starting, they're just hitting their second winds. When that happens and they become as dominant as they are, I think it creates this unease among us. As much as we use their products, or we use Facebook or even Twitter or Yahoo, there's this complete collision between our privacy and security and the amount of information that makes our lives easier. So there's this tension that's going to be going on for years to come, and I think it's just going to accelerate. And I think our editors, in a sense, and I'm giving them credit because they see this kind of developing across the gamut of everyone's lives. They see this, and I actually think what they really want to do is they want to see some sort of legislation or some sort of effect on the rest of the country from back east, because our paper's based in DC, and it's very politically oriented, and it's almost obsessed with what legislators do. So I think they want to push the agenda a little bit and try to see what they can do. And I know the New York Times is doing that. I know the Journal's doing it. I think we're all in the same direction, trying to affect change.
Well, you mentioned legislating our way in and out of problems. This has been a big topic for our researchers and a lot of our team, as well as certainly others in the vendor community, the usefulness of cybersecurity frameworks like NIST and what we're hearing coming out of the discussion over there. How useful, and is that an important dialogue? What does that mean for you?
It is, I mean, it's crucial to us. One of my frustrations writing about this stuff is I co-wrote a book back in 2008 with a colleague of mine, and our frustration was we wanted this to lead to some sort of laws or any even discussion, and it would never happen. It was always a false start. So I think now is this opportunity to really push things, and the way you push things and gain people's attention is when you write about Google and Nest, for instance. You talk about the ubiquity of all these Nest products, and believe me, it's going to extend to your remote control, to your garage door opener, to everything in your household, your dishwasher, your microwave, for all we know. And I think when you kind of hit at home what can happen to somebody, like every movement is traced to the point where you're under the surveillance, whether you like it or not, of a company like Google. I think that grabs people's attention. I think something like that, or even with what Facebook is doing with messaging, it's kind of like the deeper they embed themselves in your life, the more easy it is to try to convince people that something needs to be done or needs to be monitored. So anyway, that's kind of where it's going.
Sure. John, what put Palo Alto Networks on your radar?
Well, you know, I've heard a lot about your company. I used to cover security for a long time, and I kind of got lost in the minutia of so many security companies. And now what I'm trying to figure out is the ones to go to actually know what they're talking about, who actually can be useful and helpful to me. I think one of the traps that I fell into with security coverage, and I think it happens with a lot of reporters, is this kind of classic generic answer or generic quote, the good guys versus the bad guys, where you get kind of a vague response to everything. I think what we need, especially among reporters, is kind of a better dialogue, a more precise idea of what the problem is, how it works, how the dark web works, for instance, and how it kind of relates to us. So you take a thread from the perpetrators to the victims, and you kind of go deeper. I think before, and it's still, you still see instances of it, of people kind of throwing out cliches in kind of general terms just to cover everything. So I'm eliminating those companies that do that and just going straight to the ones that actually can add value to what I'm trying to report on.
So relating the technology to...
Yeah, we want specificity, and we want specifics. We want somebody to tell us, how it directly affects someone, kind of a paper or a digital trail, so to speak. And it's hard to find that. I think there's something I'm working on involving counterfeit goods and how they're circulated through the commercial web, through eBay, Amazon, Alibaba, which is going public, versus the dark web, where there's kind of things like guns, drugs, etc. It's all leading to consumers, and in a story like that, the reason I'm interested is that the federal government really is trying to crack down on that. So the timing is good. The timing is good on a lot of this stuff, and I don't know. I think right now is like a kind of a golden era, so to speak, of cybersecurity coverage. I think it could get really interesting, and I think it has been. If you look at some of the mainstream and especially in the trade publications and the coverage they're doing.
Sure, John, we'll be reading, and it's going to keep us all busy. So
You sure will.
Appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me.